Hey guys, welcome back to Chris and Retro. Um, tonight's show, I'm going to challenge you, and I'm challenging me as part of what I'm doing on this show, part of what I'm doing this episode, and looking at the world that we're living in right now and all the chaos that's going on and the divide. And I'm going to speak specifically to the US, the divide there is between friends and family and all that based on perception and based on what's fed to us. And I can't blame just the media for what's going on. I'm blaming us for our connection to the media and our connection to what's being told to us and our willingness to engage in a divisive world. And tonight what I want to do is put a challenge on you and talk about some of these things in a neutral setting. So I've posted a lot of stuff on social media relative to my bias with politics, and but not necessarily my bias towards a party, my bias towards certain things that are going on, and some things I agree with, and some I don't. But again, perhaps I'm part of the blame. And so tonight, what I want to do is level set that in neutral ground, use my show as a neutral ground, and in a platform where I don't have anybody here putting a muzzle in my mouth. And hopefully I can offer some ideas and some ways for you to reframe how you're thinking as we go through this season. And with that, we'll get into it. Well, I don't know about you, but I have been, especially the first couple of weeks when things really started to go down with our current administration, I was about ready to turn off social media. I mean, just the constant battling. It's like, here we go again. And it does, we've got one person that's at the center of it that really does seem to find a way to create chaos um, with his posture. I'm not saying that some of the things that are being done are absolutely necessary for the success of our country. My concern is tonight, what I want to do is talk about how are we as people interacting, and what are you as a person going to do in this season when so many things seem to be out of our control. Actually, just before I got on here now, I was going back through some stuff. I had an interesting situation on my LinkedIn account. I had somebody steal my account, which is kind of weird. 3 o'clock in the morning, I didn't know it until I woke up the next morning. I had a notice that my password had been changed to my LinkedIn account. I'm like, haven't done that in my sleep before. So I reached out to I tried to log in my LinkedIn, and sure enough, man, I can't get in my account. So I reached out to LinkedIn and had them help me over the next couple of days and regain access to my account. And come to find out, somebody named Sharon Stoltzman or something like that had taken my account, completely hijacked it, changed all the work experience, profile picture, the name, every single thing. So now emails, all this stuff. So now the only thing I hadn't changed is all my connections that are on there. And I've got a lot of them. All my people that are following me, there's a ton of them. People I'm following, there's a ton of them. And in terms of all of my social media platforms, I would say that LinkedIn is probably the one that I'm most involved in, because it's been 30 years of building that network. And it was frustrating. I mean, you don't realize like how many phone numbers you don't know until you lose your phone. And that's kind of what it felt like. I just lost all these connections. And what was more concerning is that somebody had a hold of my account, and now they could be acting as me with my connections. And that was a big concern I had. And then come to find out they had just stolen it and probably using all those connections for their own, whatever they were going to use it for. It didn't look like anything sinister had happened because I was able to correct it in time, but it was concerning. And, as I'm building that profile back up, there's some videos and things I had to add. And there was a video, an interview I did, probably it's over, I'll say it's probably 5 years ago, maybe 4.5 years ago, with a friend of mine named Scott Fitzgerald. He owns Rockvox Media and Rockvox Recording and Productions. And Rockvox, actually, when this show started, and while it was starting, it was a little cost prohibitive to use a formal studio. But you'll see some of the earlier videos in here, and that's at Rockvox. I did another show called 100 Proof of Living with a man named Brian Yates, and we did that for 3 seasons. And that was also at Rockvox. And we've got an upcoming project I'm going to be doing that's alongside of what I'm doing here that will also be using Rockvox. But the point is, he had a podcast called Positive Blatherings, and on there he interviewed me. And so I was listening to that interview. It was really like bringing up some emotions relative to what we're talking about here. And honestly, some of the things I'd lost in terms of my rigor around my recovery and how I handle my own business when it comes to life in general, because some of the stories I was telling in that interview really brought me back because I was closer to those stories. So they were more vivid in the way I was able to explain them, and I was feeling them more. And I even know my own body language. I could see myself in that video. I really was in a good place relative to my recovery. Now, fast forward all these years, and I'm seeing all this political stuff going on, and people that are in that same recovery community that had me so invigorated back then. And now many of them I'm opposed to because of what they believe about what's going on in our country. And I have to ask myself, why am I so opposed to them? I'm not opposed to them. I don't agree with their reaction. And I think that starts all this. So if I look at the things that really frustrate me the most on social media today, it's somebody's outpouring emotion related to something that's happening. And it doesn't matter to me if they're celebrating great victories that they had believed in, or if they're just writhing with anger over something that's happening where they feel like they're being treated poorly or disenfranchised or minimized or whatever else. And they're just absolute vigor to, if you're supported this side or this side, you unfriend me now. Well, if you're that opposed to them, just take them off your account. You know what I mean? But I think that I see that, and there's some people that I just have so much respect for that I don't agree with. Now, in some cases, it's really caused some problems because I don't know how to approach that person because I know we don't agree, and they're so vocal against it all. But yet I have some beliefs that I think are that are valid as well. But excuse me, I can't have those conversations because it'll present another problem. Now, I'm all for fighting what you believe, but fighting for what you believe in. And I've got a few things that I absolutely would fight for. I don't consider myself a tough guy. I consider myself a willing person to fight for the things that matter. And my kids are those things. The seat I'm sitting in, there's things I'll fight for. And I'll fight in all senses of the word for certain things. I'm a willing participant in a fight for something I believe in. What I don't like is having to defend myself for having the same right of my speech that somebody else does. What I also don't like is people that I really believe in and the work that they do that I have to feel uncomfortable about because of all of our reactions to circumstances that are all out of our control. Now, what I find interesting is that interview that I'm talking about now, from purely a political perspective, we couldn't possibly be on different spectrums. There's many things that we agree with as men and as people, but when it comes to politics based on our life experiences, we have different views. And he was one at first, you could tell he was just really brokenhearted because some of the things that he believed in were being destroyed before his very eyes in his perspective. But I earned a lot of respect for how he course corrected even his own presentation in the audience to his audience. And rather than being one that was out always just all over this stuff all the time, he turned to a positive light. And he decided to start pointing out all the positives. And what's interesting to me is that in a time when we're so divided, a person that is absolutely politically on the opposite side of the spectrum in terms of what we see as right and wrong from a politics perspective has somebody that became an example for me on how this type of thing should be handled more appropriately. He was one that was able to be positive light in the middle of this chaos. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about is how do we become pathfinders? How do we find our own path, but also be a pathfinder and light for others as we go through this? I think we could all agree on this. This constant fighting is doing us no good. It's doing no good for the country. It's doing no good for anything. I mean, you see fighting everywhere it's gotten so bad. It's unifying motorcycle club culture in many ways. Some aren't, but many ways. They're known as rebels and off the grid. And yet this environment we're living is unifying something that is a symbol of opposition. But yet this is where we find ourselves. I think it's tremendously debilitating for those that struggle with mental health issues. I think it's tremendously debilitating for those that are struggling with addiction, those who have struggled with addiction and found seasons of sobriety. It's destructive to our communities. And for you personally, it is as well. Whether you view yourself in a position of victory or a position of those being defeated and bullied, either side that you're on, you're both taking damage from this season that we're in and how we're handling it. So tonight I want to encourage you, and I want to start thinking about ways, and I say you, when I say, what I'm meaning is you and me, because I find that there's areas where I actually have to course correct things with me. And so how do we become pathfinders through the chaos? How do we see ourselves through the storm? What are our objectives for all of this? Is our objectives to constantly be in a state of opposition and constantly fight? When do we stop as I need to stop and take my own inventory only? In the past in the show, I know for sure I said take your own inventory first versus before taking somebody else's. And quite honestly, that's the first thing we do when we're struggling is take everybody else's inventory. We do it for a lot of reasons. We do it to justify our behavior. We do it to shed light away from what we're doing wrong. We do it for any number of reasons. But that's not really the correct way to put it, is to take your own inventory first. I would suggest in this time you take your inventory only. Because quite honestly, many of the cases that we find ourselves taking other people's inventories, it's because we're in a situation we have no control over it anyway. We're not experts at what we're dealing with right now. I'm not sure who is. What I can tell you, it's way above my pay grade. I can see things based on my life and work experiences that help me see things slightly different than some. And I can certainly understand if they haven't had exposure to certain things that they may see things differently. It doesn't mean they're dumb. It doesn't mean they're mean. It doesn't mean anything. It just means they see things differently. I learned tonight, I actually have my mental health appointments. I have them every week, probably every other week now. And I do that to stay grounded and help me find new tools. Sam has some diagnoses that are challenging to deal with because I don't understand them. And I learned tonight that I understand them less than I thought I did. And, one of the things that, she struggles with is ADHD. And I know a bunch of people that struggle with ADHD. And I find in all cases, I have a hard time communicating with people that struggle with that. And the reason I do is because in my opinion, it feels like people that struggle with ADHD, without understanding them, I see them as not listening to all things considered. When in fact, if they listen to more than what they're dealing with or try to deal with what more they're dealing with, they've already got all this stuff going through their head all the time and they can't get anything done if they don't focus on one thing. Whereas I don't have that diagnosis. I have depression and anxiety, and I get fear when I start seeing the collective of things not being dealt with. So those two worlds are very hard to communicate with. And if you don't know where the other person's position is and you don't know where your position is, it's almost impossible to communicate, and it will always lead to fighting. And so my obligation is to understand me and how I interact with that type of a situation. Now, Sam and I, we spend a lot of time working on our communication skills, but I can say that that's very similar to what we're dealing with here in this environment. I don't know where you're coming from and you don't know where I'm coming from, but it doesn't mean that the two of us can't get along. At the same time, it doesn't mean that we have to agree. And we don't always have to get to a place that we fully understand where somebody's position is. What I can say is there's a lot more common ground out there than we're many days willing to admit. If we're taking the time to recognize how am I personally going to get through this situation or this season of life, whether I feel like I'm in victory stage or if I feel like the country is going in the right direction, or if I feel like this country is falling apart, it really doesn't matter much except for the fact that I've got me to work on. I have to accept the fact that what's going on in the world isn't as important as what's going on inside of me. And if I am in a state where all I can do is emote anger or sadness or anything else about what's going on in the world around me that I have no control over, I'm in a very dangerous place. And I'm not saying that as a soft way to say you. I'm saying me. I have to, and I struggle with keeping my inventory time exclusive to me. Now, I think it is important to understand other people, their side and their perspective, because in that place you show respect, but you also communicate more effectively to even have a conversation with somebody, even about the toughest of things. But when we go into it with complete anger and rage or sadness and fear, there's no chance for a middle ground that says, I can talk to you, I can respect you, and I just don't agree with that opinion. Now, Scott, I have a ton of respect for Scott. I like Scott a lot, and I would do anything for him that he wanted me to. If he called me right now and said, Chris, I need you to do something, I would find anything in my power to find a way to help him do it. I believe in him, I believe in his work, and I believe everything about him as a person. I just don't agree with a lot of his positions on things, and that's okay, because I know he doesn't agree with a lot with me either. But our styles are different. He's a lot kinder person. And so isn't that great, though? How is it that how could I ever not like Scott? If he's just a good person. He just doesn't see things the way I do. And therein lies how he was able to handle things differently than many do. And I'm not suggesting that if you're loud and obnoxious and you're picking fights or being annoying, that you're a bad person. I'm just saying that you're giving yourself a position where you probably are not going to find people willing to find a middle ground. And I fall in that category. I can be really obnoxious with what I believe, and I can be antagonistic and snotty and everything else. And it doesn't really lead me into a place that's going to give me any peace whatsoever. Those fights I pick have absolutely no outcome. If I celebrate something I believe in, it's already done. If I fight for things that are just things I can't change, all I'm doing is causing problems when I'm arguing it with everybody that believes something else. I'm not saying you don't have different sides, and I certainly am not saying lay down and curl up in a ball. If you believe in something and it's not working out for you, sure, go fight, but fight smart. Fight battles you can win and make progress every single day towards what you're trying to accomplish. And therein lies something that we can work on together. Make a decision for yourself that you're going to be a pathfinder, somebody that's going to blaze this trail of uncertainty. I think that we have that in common. We are all uncertain about what the future is, and that's how it goes. We could feel like we're in a victorious position tomorrow and have the wheels fall off. We could have it just, in my life, I've had great days that were followed by absolutely horrible, horrible days. I've had great moments that by the end of the night turned into chaos. That's just my own personal life. So recognizing that as things are isn't how they're always going to be is a very healthy place to be. So why destroy every relationship around you, whether they're on your side or not? We don't need to click up. I'm not here as a peacemaker. I'm here as a sanity check. And I'm doing it for me, and I'm suggesting that you join me in this journey. I call us fellow travelers an awful lot. And the reason I do is because we are. We're in this life together, in this time, in this world's history. We are walking alongside people we agree with and don't agree with. But we are divided, and that means there's two sides of very similar size not seeing eye to eye. And that's not even counting the people in the middle that are just sick of hearing both sides. So why don't we do something about that? And as Pathfinders, let's find a way to deal with what we have to deal with. If you find yourself in a situation where you feel disadvantaged, then get around people that will support you and find a way to rise. If you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you're getting victory, don't make it all about vendetta and I told you so's. Recognize there's people that are hurting that might be from the very community that you say you serve. Don't lose focus on what you are as a person and the purpose and calling you have in this life. And if you don't know what that is, then take that as your inventory, finding out why you're here, not why things are happening like they are. Finding out why things are happening like they are, why you're doing this to me, or why that person's like that has no value for you as a human being, for you to find your purpose and fulfillment in life. We all have a calling. We all have a reason we're here or we wouldn't be here. So what is it for you? I think it's a challenge that you should put on yourself, as I've had to do it myself. As we go through this time, man, there's going to be times when I trip up. I mean, I've forwarded things that positions that I agree with. There's certain elements of what's going on right now that I'm 100% in agreement with. Some, I don't agree with how it went down. I feel bad that it's going down like it is, but I also hold hope that it's going to settle in after a while. And I think that you should too. One thing is for sure, that what we're facing right now is not a permanent state. It'll eventually will ease, or it might get worse for a while. But one thing is absolutely certain, is that things change. So you will always find yourself on one side or the other, either victory or defeat or looking into the middle of the fight. Wherever that is, your mission doesn't change at all. Your own personal inventory to make sure that you're getting stronger for your purpose and the reason you are here. I am sure of this. None of us were born here by design to create a two political system that causes people to fight. That was not why you were born. I know that's not why I was born. I was born to go through a baffling life as an alcoholic. I was born to come out of that winning some, losing some, personal screw-ups, embarrassment, all those other things, so that one person could get on the other side of this camera and say, man, I hear what he's saying. I'm going to try this. I'm going to get better. That's my hope for the show. It's my hope for every single thing I do in my life, is that somebody is stronger because of my experience, not because I'm so great. And so in knowing that, my opinion shouldn't be the be all and end all either to me. I do have belief systems. I do have things I stand for. And if you ask me what I stand for, I'll tell you what I stand for. But it shouldn't come at the expense of the reason why I'm here. For my recovery community, I've seen some baffling, antagonistic behavior on both sides. And if I'm truthful, I'm probably participating in some of it. Know that your message to fight in a political position has nothing to do with why you're here. And it shouldn't dominate your mind. And it should not become your deity or your higher power, as we call it. Because there's no power in it. It doesn't offer any serenity. It offers you no hope. It just offers you the opportunity to have chaos. Your mental health is important. Understanding that accepting the situation as it is and not as you'd have it be is important. Question yourself when you engage. Why are you engaging? Is it an ego burst? Is it because somebody's annoying you? Or do you believe it's something that's aligning with your purpose and can help your community become stronger? If it's just to win an argument with somebody and they're already entrenched in it, you're not going to change their mind. All you're going to do is bolster them and their 58 friends that are watching you guys argue online. That's not just online, although I find it mostly online, because there's not a lot of people out there that'd be willing to walk up with you in the middle of a grocery store, have a knockdown, drag out argument. Now, there are people over politics. They would over a lot of other things, but not of politics. Although, in the world we're living in right now, people are forgetting that this keyboard is a lot safer than this close to somebody's face. We do forget that. And there are some people that are being reminded of that. So you also have to consider that when you're doing this stuff in public. So for you tonight, as you're hearing this message, pause. Think about before all this stuff that got you so upset. Think about before all this political discussion happened. And if you don't have long-term memory loss or mid-term memory loss or any memory loss at all, think about before this current president was anywhere even in the political landscape. Were you this upset? And that person was as equally called to whatever your life is built for as the person that's now in the middle of this chaos. Although you've had all these life experiences since then till now to make you stronger. Don't derail that progress. And I also would leave with this. I encourage you to recognize there's only so much space in your head that you can rent. We have a lot of obligations and responsibilities that we have to uphold, especially as fathers, especially as mothers. Our job is not to win political arguments in so much as it is for us to sit alongside our kids and make sure they're stronger people so that the world we're living in actually has some more logic and conversation for it and community and ability to come along and try to solve some of these problems. We got some smart kids that been some pretty crazy stuff at their young ages. I know my kids have. They've seen an awful lot. By the time they get quote unquote of age, their ability to read the room should be pretty darn good because of everything they've seen. Let's not be bad examples of what they're seeing. Let's be examples of helping them and helping others see a way through storms. I think I've told this story on here before, but I'll share it with you one more time in the context of this. I'm not sure what your objective is, but you should have one. You should have what you're trying to accomplish in life. I remember one time I was flying from Rochester, New York to Chicago. I was flying on JetBlue, which is a New York-based airline. And I don't know this for firsthand, but my understanding is this, as it's been told to me by a number of people, that JetBlue, at least at that time, had only hired military pilots versus other commercial airlines that would hire pilots that were trained in commercial settings to fly their planes. Fundamentally, that has one big difference. A military pilot has been ingrained to accomplish a mission, whereas somebody that's trained commercially is probably more trained to operate the plane and for passenger comfort. Well, this one flight I flew JetBlue, and I fully believe this was a military pilot. And we ran into some terrible thunderstorms. And we were flying into Chicago, and Chicago can typically be a little dicey when the weather's hitting, and we were the first plane in to land. And they decided to clear us for landing. So we're going over wonderful Lake Michigan in this wonderful storm. The plane is really banging around to the point that there was an overhead compartment flew open. Probably wasn't latched that good, but we were jostling pretty good. So I can honestly believe it would have shaken it open if it wasn't doing that great, and if the latch wasn't that great. And we get flying, and we're trying to go through this storm. And also we hear over the PA that the pilot says, we don't have enough fuel to get through this, so we're going to divert to Detroit. So we flew over to Detroit, and we landed in Detroit, and everybody's sitting on the plane getting antsy and a little frazzled because that wasn't exactly the best experience. And it's not like just because we decided to go to Detroit that everything got smooth. No, it was bumpy still. We get in Detroit, and I don't even recall how long we were there, maybe an hour and a half, something like that. And they clear us to take off. So we take off for Chicago again. And this time, oh, good news, we're the first one getting cleared again. And sure enough, we're bumping around as much, but not as bad as before because the storm had passed over a little bit. But we were heading to Chicago, and we were going to land there one way or another. And this on-mission pilot was going to make sure that happened. And so we got there, and it was a really, really bumpy flight, but we made it to Chicago safe. We left Rochester, and we were going to go to Chicago, and we left Rochester and we made it to Chicago. Now, we didn't get there exactly as we thought we would, and we certainly did not get there comfortable. I can tell you right now, nobody in that plane gave a crap about who somebody's voting preference was. But we made it to our end goal, and we saw through the storm, and we just found a way to get there. And sometimes it took a little bit of a side stop in Detroit. As they say, I hope you're picking up what I'm laying down. The storms we face could really be beating up the plane of life that you're living on. Now, this could be political, or it could be just whatever it is that you're dealing with. Don't lose sight of the goal. In this case, the goal was to land in Chicago. We knew where we took off from. It doesn't look any good. It was doing no good to assess how good our takeoff was from Chicago and how things used to be in Rochester, how good things used to be back in Rochester before we got in this plane. We made a choice to buy a ticket. We made a choice to get that plane. We made a choice to go to Chicago because that was our goal. And we had a storm to go through to get there. And it took a little bit of time in Detroit, but we eventually got to Chicago. We might be in a little bit of time. We might have been in that storm right now, even where the overhead's popping open and everybody around you is a little bit upset. Maybe we just need to take a little bit of time in Detroit, refuel, get the plane back up in the air. Even if there's a little bit of storm left, land that plane in Chicago. Do it for your personal life. Let's do it for a nation as fellow travelers in this country, because I still think it's the greatest nation in the world. I think we've lost sight of a lot of things. I think there's a lot of fraud that we had to deal with, but I also think that we can't go so far that we lose empathy for those, especially when it comes to services that are needed. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in. I hope this worked for you guys and made sense tonight. It's really been on my heart. I wasn't really sure how to approach it because, I mean, these are the types of things. It's real difficult to even bring up the word politics today without somebody saying, well, what side are you on? Or picking up one word you say, and that's it. I'm going to get you. That's not what this is. I'm finding no benefit in these conversations anymore. They're doing nothing. We're just talking about the fact that we're in a plane and the overhead popped open. Well, no kidding. We're on the freaking plane. We're all here. We're all in it. Don't get up and shut the overhead. Just chill for a second. Let's go rest in Detroit for just a little bit and get more fuel on the plane. Then get through the remaining part of the storm and go on with our lives. I appreciate you guys so much and the privilege of being on this show. Between now and the next time we talk, I'm going to do everything I can to stay out of trouble, and I hope you do too.